Shabbat Shalom, everyone. So, as some of you might have known, I just came back from I don't want to necessarily say vacation, because anytime you take a trip and go to a family affair, it's not always the most relaxing. But I just came back from a trip where we were in Northern California for my nephew's bar mitzvah. And also, we were able to spend some time in Minnesota, where we had just moved from just a few short months ago. And when I was living in Minnesota, there was something that I was able to do and blessed to be able to do almost every single Monday, and that was take Aria out on a little mini date day. And so, one of the activities that we often did was we went to the Mall of America, yes, the largest mall in the country, and would go to the Crayola experience. You have some of these throughout the country. I think the closest one to all of us is, I believe, in Orlando, but it's a place that's really filled with all these different interesting activities with crayons, wax, coloring sheets, and all the like. And so this past week, I was reminded of one trip that we took on a Monday, and I think it was mostly because, as April and I said, we pretty much spent every single day at the Mall of America on our brief trip. And so I remember it was around December, around this time, about 3 years ago, and we were walking through the experience, and we were completing 3 or 4 of the colorful activities that we always did. And we were approaching our final activity of the day, and Aria could not help but focus on the coloring page that we had just made together, staring at it, looking at us. It was really cool. You had a green screen behind you, and it actually made a picture of you that you got to color. And she couldn't help but stare at this so intently. And so she was literally walking with it right in front of her face. And the only thing that broke her attention was me quickly changing her walking route so she was going to avoid a woman who was walking with her own child. As she was slightly startled and shocked, she began to cry just a little bit. But once she calmed down, I explained to her that she had to pay attention to where she was going. She needed to look around because we need to see what is around us. In that moment, she said she understood. However, those of us who have had children realize they don't always realize what they're agreeing to. A few hours later, when we got home, again, was not paying attention and bumped her head against our kitchen counter. Once the tears stopped flowing, I tried to remind her of the conversation we had just a few hours earlier. She said she remembered, but to be honest, I'm not convinced she really understood what I was saying. And now, as I reflect back on this experience, it made me realize how easy it is for us to not be aware of our surroundings, to not acknowledge the things or people around us. This week's Parsha serves as a reminder to us to pay attention, because acknowledgement and looking, or really seeing, are the focus of this week's Parsha in 3 different occasions. This week, in the first Parsha of the second book of the Torah, we are introduced to Moses in the beginning of his hero narrative. We are told that there is a new Pharaoh in Egypt who does not know Joseph and therefore punishes the Israelites for fear of their power. Moses, born to Egyptian slaves, is then saved by being placed in the river and being found by Pharaoh's daughter. After being raised in the house of the ruler, he goes out, and we are told, Vayetze el Aichav, Vayara be Svelotam, Vayara ish Mitzri, Makeh ish Ivri, Meachav. Vayichen kahol, Vayare ki ein ish Vayach HaMitzri, Vayitem neho bachol. He went out to his brethren and saw their burden, and saw an Egyptian striking a Hebrew man of his brethren. He turned this way and that way, and saw that there was no one around, and he struck down the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. The traditional commentaries suggest that this was because he wanted to make sure no one else would see him. and that it was only then that he decided he would act. However, I would like to pull an alternative read inspired by perhaps one of my favorite midrashes ever, the Prince of Egypt. In this film, it is shown that the Egyptian that is attacking the Israelites is not hidden away in some remote corner of the kingdom. Rather, it is right in the middle of a crowded area that is being worked by several Hebrew slaves and watched over by several Egyptians. Based on this interpretation, it would seem that it was Moses looking this way and that way and determining that no one else was going to help. No one else was going to step in and right the wrong. And it was his turning of his head that allowed him to see, or really acknowledge, just how cruel and unjust that situation was for the Hebrews. Then, this is quickly followed by God sort of having God's own aha moment. Or we could say a moment of acknowledgement. We are told in verse 24 of chapter 2, "And God heard their cries, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." God saw the children of Israel and knew them. Again, here, we have a biblical character having a moment of revelation, a moment of taking notice of the harsh reality. Why had God not noticed before? We are not told that and given that answer. But we are told that it is in that moment God saw them, saw that God's people were in dire oppression and needed to be saved. But before they could be saved, they had to be seen. It was a two-step process: acknowledgement of the situation and then an action to remedy the problem. And I now want to share the third moment of our parsha, where seeing plays a critical role. Moses is now in Midian, working as a shepherd for his father-in-law, Yitro. He is out in the fields, and we are then told, "An angel of Hashem appeared to him in a blaze of fire from amid a bush. He saw, and behold, the bush was burning in the fire, but the bush was not consumed." Moses thought, "I will turn aside now and see this great sight. Why will the bush not be burned?" Hashem saw that Moses turned aside to see, and God called out to him from amid the bush. Midrash Tanhuma on Shemot 15:2 further discusses the actions Moses took by turning his head aside. The question becomes, does he draw nearer to it, or does he turn away from this phenomena? The Midrash states, "And Moses said, 'I will turn aside now and see this great sight.' And Rabbi Yochanan said that Moses took 3 steps forward. However, Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish said he took no steps but turned his neck to observe. And the Holy One, blessed be he, said to him, 'Because you troubled to look, be assured you will merit that I shall reveal myself unto you.'" The Midrash tells us something interesting. It is not about if Moses was so active and enthralled in the bush that he took steps forward, or if he simply noticed a peculiarity that moved his gaze to the bush. Neither is right or wrong, because as the Midrash informs us, it is about stopping to look, stopping to take that second to remove ourselves from our own world and notice that which is around us. We all struggle with being able to see fully around us, and the Parsha tells us that explicitly. The intentional, continuous usage of the verb ra'ah, or see, by the biblical author is here to tell us it is not easy to always look outwards. To truly see something or someone can be difficult. Oftentimes, we are just like Arya when we were at Crayola. We are so focused on the things that happen to be right in front of our faces, and we can't look elsewhere. We are focused on them. Whether they are good or bad, we tend to be self-focused and absorbed. And this is necessary Because if we want to be able to look out in the world, we do first have to look inward and make sure we are okay. But the problem becomes when we do not have the balance in our life, when we only think about our problems or our accomplishments and do not look outwards to see the plight or success of those around us. Each of these scenes in this week's Parsha is followed by an action. Moses killing the Egyptian, God starting to set in motion the plans for the Exodus, and Moses ultimately going to Egypt to enact Hashem's divine plan. So it is good for us to see the good and the bad in the world that we live in, but we are missing the mark if we do not do an action to acknowledge it as well. We might see somebody who is homeless and think just how awful that is. But do we then realize that we can make a small difference by having extra food and water in our cars to give to them when we encounter them? It is great for us to see that our coworker or someone who works for us or with us is giving it their all. But do we actually acknowledge that appreciation with an action, like giving them a bonus or simply a handwritten note acknowledging them for all of their help? We need to look into the world. We need to put down the cell phone at dinner or when sitting with our family. We need to not always think about our first world problems when there are those around us missing the essentials. And the thing we must take is that once we see, we must act. That is what our Parsha of Shemot is trying to tell us. And so as we bring this year to a close, may we have a Shabbat filled with happiness and joy, and may we all see each other and our world as we come to this last Shabbat morning of 2021. Shabbat Shalom.